Viruses. From influenza to the common cold, we've all had experiences with these nasty diseases. They're easy to catch, quickly transferring from one host to another through proximity or physical contact. This also means that viruses are easily spread, and if the number of infected grows beyond what is treatable, it can cripple the entire world's health infrastructure. Overrun hospitals, behavioral mandates, and constant death are all elements of a worldwide pandemic. It's no wonder why zombie outbreaks and lab-grown diseases are such common premises for horror movies and video games. Diseases are downright scary, and it's most likely because the world has been overtaken by disease on multiple occasions that makes them so frightening. The bubonic plague, the great influenza pandemic, and even the COVID-19 pandemic are all events that have wiped out significant portions of humanity. And if left unchecked, a viral disease might be able to wipe out every last one of us. Sure, you can take measures to keep yourself safe, but who's to say a mutation isn't out of the question? A disease altering its own biology to overcome resistance and continue its spread could be a germaphobe's nightmare, and have serious consequences for the entire world. Of course, we're still talking about ordinary diseases, but what about when the virus is anything but normal? What if it falls under the umbrella that could be termed anomalous? Enter the SCP Foundation. For them, anomalous viruses are some of the hardest to secure, contain, and protect the world from. It's not hard to imagine why, either. Containing viruses often involves the spread of safety precautions and information, sometimes distributions of vaccines and medicine. Basically, to stop a virus, people need to first know what they're dealing with. When you're operating under the veil of secrecy that the Foundation has to maintain, your options for information dispersal become a lot more complicated. Of course, by nature of being anomalous, the diseases the Foundation has to deal with are a lot stranger and definitely more dangerous than just another strain of the flu. Perhaps you're already familiar with SCP-1008, the infectious disease codenamed the zombie plague that shuts down a victim's body and decays it heavily. But the SCP Foundation's Russian database has a deadly virus of its own. SCP-1007-RU is also known as the Nietzsche Virus. It's nicknamed after the famous German philosopher who coined the term "God is dead" and explored themes of nihilism, an ideology that delves into the meaninglessness of life, the universe, and humanity's existence. If that doesn't clue you in that this anomaly is horrifying, then just wait until we dive into the file itself. SCP-1007-RU is, given its viral and infectious nature, kept in a high-security containment chamber intended to seal the anomaly away from the world. The chamber is outfitted with a triple airlock system that prevents accidental leakage and unwanted access. Entry into SCP-1007-RU's containment chamber comes with its own set of special containment procedures. Researchers must outfit themselves in an insulated protective suit that allows no material from inside the chamber to make contact with their body. Once their work with SCP-1007-RU is finished, they must take a sterilizing shower to watch any potentially lingering harmful particles from their body. And if that's not enough, they're forced into a 6-hour quarantine, isolated from the rest of the Foundation until their superiors are absolutely sure that they don't exhibit signs of infection. If personnel are by chance contaminated after contact with SCP-1007-RU, the Foundation takes their best interests into account and immediately euthanizes them, followed by a cremation of their remains to make sure all biological material is destroyed entirely, as harmful infectious agents may still persist on skin tissue and inside the body long after death has occurred. Yes, the containment procedures for SCP-1007-RU is immediate termination of a valuable Foundation employee. Those don't grow on trees either, and the Foundation definitely does not resort to this option very often. But this only demonstrates the severe threat that SCP-1007-RU poses to the Foundation's integrity. Perhaps losing one employee is better than the innumerable deaths caused by a full-scale outbreak of the anomaly. The area surrounding SCP-1007-RU's containment chamber, located in a facility kept inside the larger Foundation grouping of Zone 07, is also kept free of contamination by a high-temperature sterilization process. As a final security measure to keep SCP-1007-RU's containment as safe as it can possibly be. Since SCP-1007-RU is transmitted like most contagious viral diseases, via airborne, physical, and blood contact, the Foundation has made sure their containment procedures are as safe and tightly designed as possible. Since anyone who comes into contact with the anomaly is a carrier of it, all of the precaution is understandably necessary. But what is SCP-1007-RU, aside from a deadly infectious disease? What makes it anomalous and separates it from an ordinary virus? SCP-1007-RU specifically involves a multi-step mutation of neurons. If you don't already know, neurons are cells that transmit and receive nerve impulses throughout our bodies. Neurons respond to stimuli, sensations like touch, sound, light, and information from other cells. They're an essential part of our bodies and a necessary component for cells to communicate with one another. But most importantly, neurons help us feel pain. When SCP-1007-RU infects a subject, it changes their neurons over time to allow them to feel an increased threshold of pain tolerance, meaning that the victim can feel a more intense amount of pain before succumbing to death or losing consciousness. That almost sounds beneficial, right? If everyone had an increased pain tolerance, things like minor cuts or falling off your chair would barely register as harmful. But SCP-1007-RU has a disadvantageous trade-off that comes with its multi-step nature. As the virus mutates and changes, it does so in steps. But before each stage of cell mutation occurs, the victim experiences enough pain to completely overwhelm their pain tolerance threshold. SCP-1007-RU's initial incubation period lasts 2 to 4 hours, after which the virus will make its way through the central nervous system and to the brain. The victim experiences severe pain in line with their ordinary pain threshold and promptly loses consciousness. After they regain consciousness, the true horrors of SCP-1007-RU commence, and the anomaly begins to mutate their neurons and alter their existing pain thresholds to accommodate more stimuli. SCP-1007-RU seems to have an indefinite number of stages. If the victim can handle the pain, the infection will persist, and the neutrons will continue to mutate until they're unable to suffer anymore and die from the disease. Technically speaking, the virus is infinite and will go on until death occurs, but Foundation research has found that human subjects have only been able to reach, at most, the anomaly's 6th stage, after which they die. Not a single test subject has persisted to the 7th iteration of the virus, as it's believed to be too much pain for the human body to handle. But if a subject did reach these impossible pain thresholds, they most likely wouldn't last much longer. Curiously, when the Foundation experimented with SCP-1007-RU on a rat, it survived 9 stages into the anomaly. However, the pain was too much for the researchers to bear observing, and the decision was made to put the poor creature out of its misery shortly after. Each stage follows a similar pattern, allowing it to be predictably cataloged and measured across all test subjects. First, the subject will experience severe pain just below their current pain tolerance threshold. After 36 hours, the pain will intensify, growing larger and more harmful for the victim, until they finally lose consciousness. A few minutes later, when the subject has fully regained consciousness, the next stage begins, and the process repeats itself. Only this time, the pain threshold is increased. Over time, this process will continue to repeat itself and grow more deadly until the subject expires, dying from severe levels of pain beyond any of our comprehension. What makes the disease even worse to contract is that this pain is unable to be suppressed. The Foundation has certainly tried, from analgesics to tranquilizers, and surely some mimetic agents designed to reduce painful sensations, but nothing has had any effect on an individual infected by SCP-1007-RU. They are forced to endure the pain without any reprieve for a full 36 hours before passing out. They can't even lose consciousness before the stage ends, meaning that the only break from SCP-1007-RU is the few short minutes in between stages, all before the process repeats itself again and again. Interestingly, the inactive period between stages, labeled the quiescence period, seems to increase exponentially as time goes on. The first period ranges from 48 to 108 hours, where the subject feels completely ordinary before the next active stage occurs and their pain tolerance is increased. The Foundation typically does not like to prolong the pain of its test subjects beyond what's absolutely necessary to understand all elements of an anomaly. The moral issues that resulted from SCP-1007-RU's research were addressed in a statement by Overseer 05-4, which read, "Human experiments are performed only with the explicit permission of the Overseer Council. Any requests for experiments in which a subject would have to reach the 6th stage are rejected automatically. First, try to imagine such pain. But regardless, experiments involving SCP-1007-RU have been performed for the purposes of gaining all of this information, and the Foundation kept recorded transcripts of some of them. One interview, which was held 2 hours 12 minutes after the first exposure to the virus, and then held again at 2 hours and 17 minutes following infection, involved an interaction between Dr. Lungen and an unfortunate patient. First, the patient felt fine and asked if the researcher had infected them with something. When asked to describe how they felt, they exclaimed that they felt fine and had been sitting there for 2 hours feeling normal. Then the virus took root, and a howling scream filled the room. The patient began to sob and scream, feeling pain unlike anything else they had felt before. Pain they didn't know they were capable of feeling. They called for Dr. Lungen to stop the experiment, asking why this was happening to them. But Lungen's assistant called for the subject to be restrained and locked up. As the pain increased, they became desperate, confessing to the crimes they had committed prior to being imprisoned and drafted as a Foundation D-Class personnel, and begging the Foundation to stop. But even if the Foundation wanted to, they couldn't. There was nothing they could do but watch. Adhering to the procedure, Dr. Lungen calmly told the subject to relax themselves and asked where they were feeling the pain. But the subject continued to scream, barely able to get the words out. Their head, skin, heart, stomach, bones, and teeth, every last bit of their body was overwhelmed with nothing but pure pain. The subject begged and pleaded and struggled for hours until they eventually lost consciousness. Upon coming to, the subject asked what had happened, to which Dr. Lungen's assistant, junior researcher Kozmov, responded that he'll certainly remember in 2 days. Dr. Lungen was rightfully mortified by what he witnessed on that day, and protested further experimentation with SCP-1007-RU. Lungen appeared before the Overseer Council and advocated for the destruction of the virus, but the O5s were unable to accommodate his request, as they had already severely limited the experiments and were unsure of how to take measures to eradicate the virus completely. Lungen withdrew from the SCP-1007-RU research project, and the position of research head was given to his assistant, junior researcher Kozmov. Despite Kozmov's inexperience and sadistic tendencies to prolong and observe experiences, Lungen was let go. However, Kozmov's psychological evaluation was still within the lines of what the Foundation considered acceptable, and he was given permission to have complete control over all SCP-1007-RU research materials. The file ends with a single note, written by Kozmov shortly after his promotion to research head. Permission has been granted for experiments involving humans up to stage 9. M.S. Kozmov. Now go check out SCP-610 The Flesh That Hates and SCP-500 Panacea for more anomalous diseases and cures.